Dr. David Chen had been living alone in his grandfather's old cabin for 3 months now. The wooden house sat deep in the Colorado mountains, far away from the busy city life he once knew. Every morning, he would wake up to the sound of birds and wind through the pine trees. It was peaceful, but the quiet also reminded him of how empty his life had become. 6 months ago, his wife of 8 years had left him. She didn't just leave, she ran away with his best friend, someone he had trusted completely. The pain was still fresh, like a wound that wouldn't heal. That's why he took time off from his job at the hospital. Being an orthopedic surgeon meant fixing broken bones, but he couldn't figure out how to fix his own broken heart. The cabin was simple, but comfortable. His grandfather had built it with his own hands 40 years ago. There was a fireplace, a small kitchen, and just enough space for one person to think. David spent his days hiking the mountain trails, reading old books, and trying to understand where his life went wrong. Sometimes he would sit on the porch for hours, just watching the clouds move across the sky. On this particular evening in late October, storm clouds were gathering. The wind was getting stronger, and David could smell rain in the air. He was inside, making himself a simple dinner when the first lightning struck. The thunder that followed shook the entire cabin. He had seen mountain storms before, but this one felt different somehow. As he watched through the window, the lightning seemed to be getting brighter and more frequent. The flashes were so intense, they turned night into day for split seconds. Then something strange happened. Instead of the usual white lightning, he saw a flash of blue light that was unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't coming from the clouds. It was coming from the forest. The blue light was so bright it hurt his eyes. For a moment, he couldn't see anything at all. When his vision slowly returned, he noticed something odd. The forest in the distance was glowing with a soft, pulsing light. It looked like someone had set off fireworks, but the glow wasn't fading away like fireworks should. David grabbed his flashlight and rain jacket. As a doctor, he was used to emergency situations. His first thought was that maybe a plane had crashed, or someone was in trouble. He couldn't just sit in his warm cabin while people might be hurt and needing help. The rain was starting to fall harder, but he pushed through the trees toward the strange light. The forest was thick with pine trees and fallen logs. Every few steps, his flashlight would catch raindrops, falling like tiny diamonds. The closer he got to the light, the more unusual things became. The air felt different. It was warmer than it should be, and there was a humming sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When he finally reached the source of the light, David stopped, dead in his tracks. In front of him was a crater about 20 feet wide. The earth was still smoking, and the rocks around the edges looked like they had melted and then cooled again. But this wasn't caused by any meteor he had ever heard of. In the center of the crater sat something that looked like it came from a science fiction movie. It was shaped like a large egg, but made of what appeared to be crystal or glass. The surface was smooth and seemed to glow from the inside with that same blue light he had seen from his cabin. Strange symbols were carved into the surface, and they were pulsing with light in a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. David climbed down into the crater carefully. The ground was warm under his feet, and the humming sound was getting louder. As he got closer to the crystal object, he could see through its surface. His heart nearly stopped when he realized what he was looking at. Inside the crystal pod was a person, a young woman who appeared to be unconscious, but she wasn't like any person he had ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost glowing with its own soft light. Her hair was long and silver, flowing around her like she was floating in water. Even through the crystal, he could tell that something was very wrong with her left leg. As David stood there in the rain, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, the crystal pod suddenly cracked. The sound was like glass breaking, but musical at the same time. The crack spread across the surface in beautiful patterns, and then the top half of the pod slowly opened like a flower blooming. The woman inside stirred slightly. David could see her face clearly now. She looked young, maybe in her 20s, but there was something timeless about her features. Her skin had an almost pearl-like quality, and when she briefly opened her eyes, they seemed to shift between silver and deep purple colors. She tried to speak, but the words weren't in any language David recognized. The sounds were melodic, almost like singing, but filled with pain. Then her eyes closed again, and she went still. David's medical training kicked in immediately. He could see that her left leg was badly broken. The bone was sticking out through. Her skin and the wound should have been bleeding heavily, but instead of blood, there was a strange glowing liquid that seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as the symbols on the pod had been pulsing. David knew he had to act fast. Whatever this woman was, wherever she came from, she was badly hurt and needed medical attention immediately. He carefully lifted her from the broken pod. She was surprisingly light, as if her bones were made of something less dense than human bone. Her skin felt warm but had an unusual texture, like touching polished stone. The rain was getting heavier as David carried her back through the forest to his cabin. With each step, he could feel her growing weaker. Whatever that glowing liquid was, she was losing too much of it. By the time he got her inside and laid her on his couch, her breathing was shallow and her skin was losing its glow. David quickly gathered his medical supplies. He always kept a well-stocked first aid kit in the cabin, along with some surgical tools from his hospital days. But as he prepared to examine her injury more closely, he realized that everything he knew about medicine might not apply to this woman. Her wound was unlike anything he had seen in 15 years of being a doctor. The broken bone seemed to be made of a crystalline material that was still glowing faintly. The liquid coming from the wound wasn't red like blood. It was a silvery blue color that sparkled in the lamplight. And strangest of all, he could swear. He heard a soft musical tone coming from the injury itself. David was cleaning the wound as gently as possible when the woman's eyes suddenly snapped open. They were bright silver now, with pupils that seemed to contain tiny stars. She looked directly at him with an intensity that made him feel like she could see right into his soul. Then she reached out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. Her grip was warm and sent a strange tingling sensation up his arm. For just a moment, David felt like he could sense her emotions. Fear, pain, but also gratitude and something else he couldn't identify. Then she spoke one word in perfect, clear English. Don't. Her voice was soft, but carried an authority that made David freeze. She was telling him not to treat her wound the way he normally would. But if he didn't do something soon, he was sure she would die right there on his couch. The glow in her skin was getting dimmer by the minute, and her breathing was becoming more labored. David looked into her strange, beautiful eyes and realized that this night was going to change his life forever. Nothing would ever be the same. Again. Whatever this woman was, wherever she had come from, she had crashed into his quiet, lonely world like a comet. And somehow he knew that helping her was going to require him to throw away everything he thought he knew about medicine, about science, and maybe even about what was possible in the universe. The storm outside was getting worse, but inside the small cabin, two beings from different worlds were about to begin a journey that would test everything they believed about healing, about trust, and about the power of connection between two souls who should never have met. David stared at the mysterious woman lying on his couch. Her single word, "Don't," echoed in his mind. As a doctor, every instinct told him to clean the wound and set the broken bone immediately. But something in her eyes made him hesitate. Those silver eyes seemed to hold knowledge far beyond anything he understood. The woman tried to sit up, wincing in pain. David gently helped her, propping pillows behind her back. She looked around the cabin with curiosity, taking in the simple wooden furniture, the crackling fireplace, and the medical supplies David had laid out on the coffee table. "Thank you," she said softly, her accent unlike anything David had ever heard. It was musical, with each word flowing into the next like a gentle song. "You saved me from the storm." "What's your name?" David asked, settling into the chair across from her. "And where did you come from?" "That thing you were in." "It wasn't from around here," she smiled sadly. "My name is Lyra. I come from very far away, farther than you might believe." She gestured weakly toward her injured leg. "This is why I told you not to treat me like one of your people. My body, it works differently." David leaned forward, fascinated despite his confusion. "Different how? You look human, mostly. But your skin, your eyes, and whatever that liquid is coming from your wound, it's not blood." "No, it's not blood," Lyra agreed. "My people call it life song. It carries the music that keeps us alive. And my bones." She touched her injured leg carefully. "They're not like yours. They're made of living crystal that vibrates with specific frequencies. When they break, the music goes wrong." This sounded impossible to David, but he had seen the glowing, crystalline structure in her wound. "Living crystal? That's not possible." "On my world, everything is connected by sound and vibration," Lyra explained. "Our cities are grown from crystal that sings. Our bodies heal through harmony. But here on your world, the frequencies are all wrong. That's why my leg won't heal itself." "Like it should." David rubbed his temples. 3 hours ago, his biggest worry was whether to make coffee or tea with dinner. Now, he was talking to someone who claimed to be from another world. "Let's say I believe you. How did you get here?" Lyra's expression grew troubled. "I was running away. On my world, I am important. My family wanted me to marry someone I could never love, someone cruel and controlling. So I took one of our travel pods and tried to escape to the outer systems. But he followed me. His ships damaged my pod and I crashed here." "Travel pods? You mean like spaceships?" "Something like that," Lyra nodded. "But powered by crystal harmony rather than what you would call engines. When the crystals in my pod were damaged, it fell through your sky like a burning star." David looked at her injured leg again. The glow was getting dimmer, and he could see that she was getting weaker. "Whatever the explanation, you're hurt badly. If I don't do something, soon you're going to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Die, yes," Lyra said calmly. "The disharmony in my leg is spreading through my body. Soon all of my crystals will be singing wrong, and then my life song will stop forever." "Then let me help you. I'm a doctor. I fix broken bones every day." Lyra shook her head. "Your medicine won't work on me." "But—" She looked thoughtful. "There might be another way. Do you have anything that makes pure tones, like bells or singing bowls?" David thought for a moment. "My grandfather used to tune pianos. He left some tuning forks in the closet, and there are some old wind chimes on the porch." "Why?" "Sound is the key," Lyra explained. "If we can create the right frequencies, we might be able to retune my crystal bones back to their proper harmony. But it would require you to touch the injury directly while maintaining perfect pitch." The idea seemed crazy, but David had already accepted that this entire situation was beyond normal. "How would I know what pitch to use?" "I would have to connect our minds temporarily," Lyra said quietly. "It's something my people can do, but it would be the first time I've tried it with someone from your world. I don't know if it will work, or what it might do to you." David considered this. The rational part of his mind screamed that this was all impossible. But looking at Lyra's fading glow and hearing the weakness in her voice, he knew he had to try something. "What do you need me to do?" Lyra smiled gratefully. "First, gather all the sound-making objects you can find. Then we'll need to create a circle around me with crystals or stones, anything that might resonate with natural frequencies. David spent the next hour collecting everything he could think of. He found his grandfather's tuning forks, an old set of wind chimes, some quartz stones from the garden, and even a crystal paperweight that had belonged to his grandmother. He arranged everything in a circle around the couch where Lyra lay. "Now," Lyra said, "you'll need to place your hands directly on my leg, right where the break is. When I connect our minds, you'll be able to hear what the crystal should sound like when it's healthy. Your job is to match that sound using the tools around us." David hesitated. "This is going to sound strange, but I've never believed in alternative medicine. I'm a traditional doctor. I believe in science and proof and things I can measure." "Sometimes," Lyra said gently, "the most important things can't be measured. They can only be felt." Taking a deep breath, David placed his hands on either side of Lyra's injured leg. Her skin was warm and had an unusual texture, like touching polished marble. The moment his hands made contact, Lyra closed her eyes and began to hum a low, beautiful note. Suddenly, David's mind exploded with new sensations. He could hear music everywhere, in the crackling of the fire, in the rain on the roof, even in his own heartbeat. But most importantly, he could hear the discord coming from Lyra's broken bone. It was like a violin with a broken string, trying to play in an orchestra but creating only harsh, painful noise. At the same time, he began to see flashes of Lyra's memories. He saw her world, a place of incredible beauty where cities of living crystal rose toward multiple suns. He felt her loneliness as a princess trapped by duty and expectation. He experienced her terror as she fled from a forced marriage to someone who saw her as property rather than a person. "Can you hear it?" Lyra's voice seemed to come from inside his own mind. "The song my bones should be singing?" David concentrated, and gradually he began to distinguish a pure, clear tone buried beneath the discord. It was beautiful, like the sound of wind through crystal caves. "Yes, I can hear it. But how do I recreate it?" "Try the tuning fork marked A. Strike it and hold it near the break." David reached for the tuning fork with one hand while keeping the other on Lyra's leg. When he struck the fork, it rang out clearly. Immediately, he felt a response in her crystal bone, a slight shifting toward harmony. "Close, but not quite right," Lyra's mental voice guided him. "Try combining it with the wind chimes." For the next 2 hours, David worked with various combinations of sounds. Sometimes he used multiple tuning forks together. Other times he found that tapping the quartz stones created perfect overtones. Gradually, the harsh discord from Lyra's injury began to resolve into something beautiful. The process was exhausting but also amazing. Through their mental connection, David could feel Lyra's pain decreasing as the harmony improved. More than that, he began to understand things about healing that all his medical training had never taught him. He realized that bodies weren't just biological machines. They were complex systems of energy and vibration that could be influenced by more than just surgery and medication. As the healing progressed, David also felt his own emotional wounds beginning to shift. The bitterness and pain from his divorce, which had been eating at him for months, started to transform into something else. Through Lyra's mind, he could feel what real love was supposed to be like, not the possessive conditional love he had experienced in his marriage, but something pure and accepting. Finally, after what felt like hours, the discord completely resolved. Lyra's bones sang out in perfect harmony, and the crystalline structure began to knit itself back together. David watched in amazement as the break sealed itself with beautiful bell-like tones. The silvery liquid stopped flowing, and Lyra's skin regained its full luminous glow. "It's done," Lyra whispered, both aloud and in his mind. "You did it. You saved my life." As their mental connection slowly faded, David felt a profound sense of loss. For those few hours, he had experienced a connection, deeper than anything he had ever known. Now, sitting back in his chair, he felt more alone than ever. But when Lyra looked at him with her now bright silver eyes, he saw something there that gave him hope. Gratitude, yes, but also a warmth that spoke of possibilities he had never dared to imagine. "Thank you," she said simply. "In all my years, no one has ever cared for me the way you just did. Not as a princess, not as someone important, but just as me." David realized that in healing her, something inside him had been healed, too. For the first time since his divorce, he felt like maybe, just maybe, his broken heart might be capable of loving again. The next few days passed like a dream for David. Having Lyra in his cabin was like having a piece of starlight living in his simple mountain home. She moved with a grace that seemed to defy gravity, and everything she touched seemed to glow a little brighter afterward. Each morning, David would wake up and for a moment think it had all been an incredible dream. Then he would hear Lyra humming softly in the kitchen, and reality would settle back in. She was real. She was here. And somehow, she had chosen to stay with him while her body fully recovered. "Your world is so different from mine," Lyra said, one morning as they sat on the porch drinking coffee. She held the warm mug in both hands, fascinated by the simple pleasure of it. "On Ethros, we don't need to eat or drink the way you do. We get energy directly from our crystals and the songs they sing." David watched her face light up as she described her home. "Tell me more about it. What's it like there?" Lyra's eyes grew distant with memory. "Imagine cities that grow like flowers, but made of crystal that changes color with the time of day. Our buildings sing to each other, creating harmonies that can be heard across entire continents. The sky has 3 suns, and when they set together, the whole world glows like the inside of a giant jewel." "It sounds beautiful," David said, though he felt a pang of sadness. How could his simple Earth life compare to something so magical? "It is beautiful," Lyra agreed. "But it's also very lonely. Every day was the same for me. I would sit in crystal towers, listening to advisors tell me what a princess should do, who a princess should marry, how a princess should think. I never got to choose anything for myself." David understood that feeling more than she knew. "I felt trapped too, in my own way. Everyone expected me to be the perfect husband, the successful doctor, the man who had everything figured out. When my marriage fell apart, I realized I didn't even know who I really was underneath all those expectations." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching clouds drift between the mountain peaks. It amazed David how easy it was to talk to Lyra. Despite coming from different worlds, literally, they understood each other in ways that felt natural and right. "Can you show me more of your abilities?" David asked. "I mean, if it's not too tiring for you." Lyra smiled and held out her hands, palms up. Slowly, points of light began to appear above her fingers, dancing like tiny stars. The light swirled and moved, creating patterns that were hypnotically beautiful. As they danced, they made soft chiming sounds that harmonized with each other. "This is how we communicate emotions on my world," Lyra explained. "Colors and sounds that speak directly to the heart, without needing words." The lights above her hands shifted to warm golden hues, and the sounds became like gentle laughter. David felt a wave of happiness wash over him, so pure and joyful that he couldn't help but smile. "What are you saying?" he asked. "That I'm grateful," Lyra said softly. "That for the first time in my life I feel free. That being here with you makes me happy in ways I never knew were possible." David felt his heart skip. Over the past few days, he had started to develop feelings for Lyra that went far beyond just helping an injured stranger. But he had been afraid to acknowledge them, afraid that someone so extraordinary could never care for someone as ordinary as him. Their peaceful moment was shattered by a sound that made Lyra's face go pale with terror. It was a low humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once, growing louder by the second. The air itself began to vibrate, and David's coffee mug rattled on the porch railing. "No," Lyra whispered, standing up so quickly that her chair fell over. "He found me. He actually found me." "Who found you?" David asked, though he had a sinking feeling he already knew. Before Lyra could answer, 3 sleek objects appeared in the sky above the forest. They looked like elongated teardrops made of the same crystalline material as Lyra's escape pod, but much larger. They moved without making any sound except for that low, ominous humming. The ships descended slowly, coming to hover just above the tree line. David could see symbols glowing along their surfaces, similar to the ones that had been on Lyra's pod, but somehow more aggressive-looking. "It's Zephyx," Lyra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The man my family wanted me to marry. He's tracked me across the galaxy." One of the ships moved closer to the cabin, and a beam of light shot down from it. Within the beam, a figure began to materialize. As the light faded, David found himself looking at someone who was clearly from the same world as Lyra. But everything about him was wrong. Zephyx was tall and imposing, with the same luminous skin and silver hair as Lyra. But where her presence felt warm and gentle, his felt cold and demanding. His eyes were like chips of ice, and when he smiled, it was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "My dear Lyra," Zephyx said, his voice carrying easily across the distance between them, "you've led me on quite a chase. I do hope you've enjoyed your little adventure because it's time to come home." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Lyra called back, moving to stand beside David. "I told you before, I will never marry you." Zephyx's smile grew colder. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice in the matter. The marriage contracts have been signed by the High Council. You are legally bound to me whether you like it or not." "Those contracts were signed without my consent," Lyra said, her voice growing stronger. "And I renounce them. I choose to stay here." For the first time, Zephyx looked directly at David. The alien's gaze was like being examined by a predator, deciding if you were worth hunting. "Ah, I see," Zephyx said with amusement. "The little princess has found herself a pet. How quaint." He looked David up and down dismissively. "Tell me, human, do you have any idea what you're interfering with? Lyra is the daughter of the High Counselor of Ethros. She is promised to me, and through our union, I will control half the galaxy." "She's not property," David said, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "She's a person who can make her own choices." Zephyx laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "A person? She's royalty, you primitive creature. She has responsibilities that go far beyond whatever simple emotions you've managed to stir up in her." "Don't talk to him like that," Lyra said, stepping protectively in front of David. "David saved my life. He showed me what it means to be cared for as an individual, not as a title or a political advantage." "How touching," Zephyx said mockingly. "But I'm afraid this romantic interlude is over. Lyra, you will come with me now, or I will demonstrate to your new friend exactly how outmatched his primitive world is compared to our technology." As if to emphasize his point, one of the other ships fired a beam of energy at a large pine tree near the cabin. The tree simply vanished, leaving behind only a small pile of sparkling dust. "You see?" Zephyx continued. "I could erase this entire mountain in seconds. But I'm feeling generous today. Return with me willingly, and I'll allow your pet human to continue his insignificant existence." David felt a chill of fear, but also a surge of anger. He had spent months feeling powerless and defeated after his divorce. But now, Facing this arrogant alien who treated Lyra like an object to be collected, he found a strength he didn't know he had. "There has to be another way," David said. "Some kind of law or custom that gives Lyra the right to choose for herself." Zephyx looked genuinely surprised that David had spoken again. Laws? Customs? He seemed to consider this for a moment. Then his cold smile returned. "Well, there is one ancient tradition, though it hasn't been invoked in centuries. The rite of heart challenge." "What's that?" Lyra asked, though her expression suggested she already knew and didn't like the answer. "A contest between the betrothed and any rival for the bride's hand," Zephyx explained with obvious pleasure. "A battle of minds and spirits, where the winner proves their worthiness through the strength of their emotions and the depth of their connection to the bride." David felt Lyra's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. "David, no," she whispered. "You don't understand what you'd be facing. Zephyx has trained in mental combat his entire life. He could destroy your mind without even trying." But David was already stepping forward. He thought about his grandfather, who had built this cabin with his own hands and never backed down from a challenge. He thought about his medical training, all those years of learning to stay calm under pressure. Most of all, he thought about the connection he and Lyra had shared during her healing, that moment when two minds had become one. "I accept the challenge," David said clearly. Zephyx's eyebrows rose in genuine surprise. "How unexpected. Very well, human. But understand this, when you lose, and you will lose, Lyra returns with me immediately. And you, well, let's just say you won't be capable of missing her. And if I win?" David asked. "If you win," Zephyx said with a laugh that suggested such a thing was impossible, "then I will release all claims to Lyra and never trouble either of you again. But I warn you, this is not a game. You will be fighting for your very sanity." David looked at Lyra, seeing the fear in her silver eyes. But he also saw something else, hope, and a love so pure it took his breath away. "When do we start?" David asked. Zephyx's smile became truly frightening. "Right now." David's heart was beating so fast he thought it might explode. He had just agreed to fight someone with mental powers he couldn't even imagine. But when he looked at Lyra's frightened face, he knew he would do anything to protect her freedom. "David, please reconsider," Lyra whispered urgently. "You don't understand what a heart challenge involves. Zephyx will try to break your mind by attacking your deepest fears and most painful memories. He's done this before." Zephyx laughed from where he stood near his ship. "Oh yes, I've won many such challenges. There was the Prince of Valdris who thought he could steal my first bride. After our battle, he spent the rest of his life staring at walls, unable to remember his own name." "That's enough," David said, though his voice shook slightly. "Just tell me how this works." Zephyx waved his hand, and the air around them began to shimmer. "The heart challenge takes place in a realm of pure thought and emotion. We will both enter a shared mental space where our feelings become weapons and our memories become shields. The last one standing wins." The shimmering in the air grew stronger, and David began to feel strange. It was like the world was becoming less solid around him. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds seemed to echo strangely, and he could swear he heard music coming from everywhere at once. "Remember," Lyra said quickly, grabbing David's hand, "your love is real. His is based on possession and control. Real love is always stronger than false love, no matter how much power someone has." Before David could respond, the world around him dissolved completely. He found himself standing in what looked like a vast arena made of swirling colors and shifting lights. The ground beneath his feet felt solid, but it seemed to be made of crystallized music that chimed softly with each step. Across from him, Zephyx stood looking completely at ease. The alien commander was dressed in armor that seemed to be made of black crystal. and his eyes glowed with cold fire. "Welcome to the realm of the heart," Zephix said, his voice echoing strangely in the space. "Here, your thoughts and emotions take physical form. Let me show you what I mean." Zephix raised his hand, and suddenly the air around David filled with chains made of shadow and ice. They wrapped around David's arms and legs, and each link whispered cruel words in his ear. "Failure," the chains whispered. "Your wife left you because you weren't good enough. You're not good enough for anyone, especially not for a princess from the stars." David struggled against the chains, but they seemed to grow stronger the more he fought them. Each whisper cut into his heart like a knife, bringing back all the pain and self-doubt from his divorce. "You see?" Zephix said with satisfaction. "I know all about your pathetic human emotions. Your insecurity, your fear of abandonment, your belief that you're not worthy of love. These chains are made from your own thoughts." For a moment, David almost gave up. The chains felt so real, and the words they whispered seemed to contain truths he had been trying to avoid. Maybe he really wasn't good enough for Lyra. Maybe he was just a lonely man who had confused gratitude with love. But then he remembered something. He remembered the moment when he and Lyra's minds had connected during her healing. In that perfect moment, he had felt what real love was supposed to be like. Not the demanding, conditional love he had known in his marriage, but something pure and accepting and free. "You're wrong," David said, and his voice carried more strength than he expected. "Those chains aren't made from my thoughts. They're made from my fears. And I'm not afraid anymore." As he spoke, warm golden light began to flow from David's hands. The light touched the shadow chains, and they began to melt away like ice in sunshine. With each chain that dissolved, David felt stronger and more certain. "Impossible," Zephix snarled. "You're just a primitive human. You can't have that kind of mental discipline." "Maybe not," David admitted. "But I have something you don't understand. I have love that doesn't try to own or control. I love Lyra enough to let her choose. For herself, even if she chooses to leave me." Now it was David's turn to attack. He thought about every moment he had shared with Lyra. The way she had looked at him with gratitude and growing affection, the conversations they had shared on the porch, the feeling of her hand in his. These memories transformed into butterflies, made of light that swarmed around Zephix. "What is this?" Zephix demanded, swatting at the glowing butterflies. But wherever they touched him, his black crystal armor began to crack. "These are memories of real connection," David explained. "Moments when two people chose to trust each other, to be vulnerable with each other, to care about each other's happiness, more than their own desires." Zephix's confident expression was starting to crack along with his armor. "Sentiment," he spat. "Weakness. I have conquered entire star systems. I have bent the will of thousands to my desires. I am powerful beyond your comprehension." "But you've never been loved," David said quietly. "Not really. You've been feared, obeyed, even desired. But love? Real love requires seeing someone as they truly are and accepting them completely. You can't do that because you only see people as things to be owned." The butterflies of light were joined by other creatures now. Birds that sang with Lyra's laughter, flowers that bloomed with the colors of her light displays, streams of water that flowed with the music of her world. All of David's positive memories of Lyra were coming to life around them. Zephix tried to fight back with shadows of conquest and control, with manifestations of his power and authority. But every shadow was dissolved by the light of genuine affection and care. "This isn't possible," Zephix said, and for the first time he sounded uncertain. "I am the stronger warrior. I have trained for this my entire life." "You trained to dominate," David said. "But love isn't about domination. It's about connection, and right now I'm not fighting alone." As if summoned by his words, David suddenly felt Lyra's presence in the mental arena. She couldn't participate directly in the challenge. That was against the rules. But her love and support flowed to him like sunlight through clouds. With Lyra's emotional support strengthening him, David's manifestations of love became even more powerful. The arena filled with the sound of laughter, the warmth of shared conversations, the gentle touch of understanding hands. Every beautiful moment that could exist between two people who truly cared for each other was there, surrounding Zephyx with a love he had never experienced and could not understand. "I surrender," Zephyx said suddenly, his voice barely a whisper. His black crystal armor had completely cracked away, and underneath David could see that the alien commander looked smaller somehow, almost fragile. I can't fight this. I don't understand what it is, but I can't fight it." The mental arena began to fade, and David found himself back in the real world, standing on his porch. Lyra was beside him, her eyes shining with tears of joy and relief. Zephyx stood near his ship, looking dazed and confused. "I don't understand," he said again. "How did you defeat me with such softness?" "It wasn't softness," David said gently. "It was strength. The kind of strength that comes from caring about someone else's happiness more than your own pride." For a long moment, Zephyx stood silently. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his ship. The beam of light surrounded him, and he was gone. The three crystal ships rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars. "Is it over?" David asked, hardly daring to believe it. Lyra threw her arms around him, and David could feel her joy like warm sunshine on his face. "It's over," she said. "You won. You actually won." "We won," David corrected her. "I couldn't have done it without knowing that you believed in me." As they held each other under the mountain stars, David realized that his broken heart had finally begun to heal. Not just heal, but become stronger than it had ever been before. Love, he now understood, wasn't about finding someone to complete you. It was about finding someone you wanted to share your completeness with. And in Lyra's arms, surrounded by the quiet peace of the mountains, David felt more complete than he ever had in his life. 3 months had passed since the Heart Challenge, and David's life had transformed in ways he never could have imagined. The quiet mountain cabin that had once felt like a place of exile now felt like the center of the universe, because Lyra was there with him. Every morning brought new wonders. David would wake to find Lyra sitting by the window, her hands creating small light displays as she watched the sunrise. The patterns she made seemed to dance with the morning light, creating colors that didn't exist anywhere else on Earth. "Do you miss your home?" David asked one morning as they shared coffee on the porch. It was a question he had been afraid to ask, but he needed to know. Lyra was quiet for a moment, considering. "I miss some things," she said honestly. "I miss the music of the crystal cities and the way the three suns would set in harmony. But I don't miss feeling trapped. I don't miss being told who I should be and who I should love." She took his hand and smiled. "Besides, this is my home now. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." David felt his heart swell with happiness, but also with a touch of concern. "But what about your people? Don't they need you?" "My people need to learn what I've learned," Lyra said. "That love can't be commanded or arranged. That the strongest bonds are the ones people choose for themselves." She looked thoughtful. "Actually, I've been receiving messages from home, not from the High Council, but from younger Ethrosians who heard about what happened here." "What kind of messages?" Lyra stood and walked to the edge of the porch, gazing up at the afternoon sky. "Messages from others who want to find their own paths, who don't want to be bound by ancient traditions that no longer serve anyone. The story of how a human defeated Zephyx through love instead of force has spread across many worlds." This was news to David. I defeated him? The way I remember it, we defeated him together. That's exactly why the story is spreading, Lyra said with a smile. In all the legends of the Heart Challenge, victory always came through superior mental strength or combat training, but you won through connection, through genuine care for another person. It's given hope to people across the galaxy who thought they had no choice in their own lives. Over the following weeks, David began to understand what Lyra meant. Sometimes, late at night, strange lights would appear in the sky above their cabin. They weren't threatening like Zephix's ships had been. These lights pulsed with gentle, curious energy. Others like me, Lyra explained during one such display. People from different worlds who want to see the place where love conquered force. I've been communicating with them, sharing what I've learned about choosing your own path. David was amazed by this development, but also slightly overwhelmed. Are we going to have alien visitors showing up regularly? Only if you're comfortable. With it, Lyra assured him. I would never bring danger to our home. But David, we could help people. We could show them that different species, different worlds, can find common ground through understanding and care. The idea excited and terrified David in equal measure. 3 months ago, he had been a broken-hearted surgeon hiding in the mountains. Now he was apparently some kind of intergalactic symbol of hope. What would that look like? He asked. We could start small, Lyra suggested. There's a young couple from the Centauri system. He's from a warrior culture, she's from a peaceful farming world. Their families are forbidding their relationship because they think the cultural differences are too great. Maybe we could help them see that love can bridge any gap. David thought about his own transformation. 6 months ago, he had believed that love was fragile, something that could be broken by the first real challenge. Now he understood that real love was the strongest force in the universe, capable of crossing not just cultural divides, but the vast emptiness between stars. Yes, he said. Let's help them. And so began a new chapter in their lives. David found himself using his medical training in ways he had never expected, learning to heal not just physical injuries, but the emotional wounds that came from families and societies that didn't understand love across differences. Lyra taught him more about her people's abilities, showing him how to sense the emotional resonance of others, how to create harmony where there had been discord. In return, David taught her about human resilience, about the quiet strength that came from choosing to love even when it was difficult. Their cabin became a quiet sanctuary for beings from across the galaxy who needed help finding their own paths. David installed better communication equipment and even learned some basic phrases in several alien languages. Lyra created a garden where plants from different worlds could grow together, each one singing its own note in an incredible symphony of life one evening. As they sat watching another set of gentle lights dance across the sky, David reflected on how completely his life had changed. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your ship had crashed somewhere else? He asked. Lyra leaned against, his shoulder warm and solid and real. Sometimes, she admitted. But then I remember something my grandmother told me when I was little. She said that the universe has a way of bringing together the people who need each other most, even if they come from opposite ends of creation. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. She also told me that the greatest adventures begin when you stop running from your fears and start running toward your dreams. Lyra looked up at David with eyes that still shifted between silver and deep purple, still filled with wonders he was only beginning to understand. Meeting you taught me the difference. David kissed the top of her head, breathing in the subtle fragrance that reminded him of mountain air and starlight. Meeting you taught me that I was worth loving, that I was capable of loving someone completely without trying to own or control them. And now we get to teach others the same thing, Lyra said contentedly. As if summoned by her words, a new set of lights appeared in the sky. 2 small craft flying close together, their combined glow creating patterns that even David could read, as expressions of hope and nervousness. The couple from Centauri? David asked. Yes, Lyra confirmed, standing and beginning to create welcoming light patterns with her hands. They've traveled so far to ask for our help. David stood beside her, ready to offer whatever wisdom he could to two beings who, like them, had chosen love over convention, hope over fear. Think we can help them? He asked. Lyra smiled, her entire being radiating the kind of joy that could light up solar systems. David, we're living proof that love can overcome anything. Of course we can help them. As the two small ships descended toward their mountain sanctuary, David realized that his story with Lyra was far from over. It was actually just beginning. They had found each other across the vastness of space, healed each other's deepest wounds, and discovered that love really was the most powerful force in the universe. Now they had the rest of their lives to share that love with others, to help. Heal a galaxy one heart at a time. David couldn't think of any adventure he would rather have. Under the light of Earth's moon and 1,000 distant suns, he took Lyra's glowing hand in his and stepped forward to greet their new visitors. Together, they would show two more beings that love knows no boundaries, recognizes no impossible distances, and can bloom anywhere there are hearts brave enough to be vulnerable. The cabin in the mountains had become so much more than a hiding place. It had become a beacon of hope, shining across the darkness between worlds, calling to anyone who believed that love was worth fighting for. And David and Lyra, the doctor who had learned to heal with more than medicine and the princess who had chosen freedom over duty, stood ready to answer that call, today and for all the days to come.